Picture, if you will, Hiroshima, the late 1980s. A young boy draws in class as his favourite teacher announces that this will be his last day teaching before transferring to another school. As a parting gift, the boy gives the teacher a drawing, and the teacher is so impressed that he would later show the drawing to his new students, and quickly, word began to spread about the boy's immense talents, and before long, the boy became a local legend. A few short years later, his smash hit, internationally renowned manga has earned him legions of adoring fans, an anime series, a musical stage show, every kind of merchandise under the sun, and perhaps most importantly, entry into what became known as Shonen Jump's legendary Big Three, alongside industry giants Naruto and One Piece. That boy was Tite Kubo, and that manga was Bleach. Bleach would enjoy nearly a decade of success, but, however, fast forward to present day and things have changed. Things have changed a lot. Massive fan backlash, a cancelled anime, hugely diminished tankobon sales, a deleted Twitter account, and most recently, a brutally short final run in Shonen Jump magazine. Kubo being given only 3 chapters to conclude a story nearly 15 years in the making. So how could this have happened? What could have possibly taken place to bring one of the 3 giants of Shonen Jump to its knees? Well friends, that's what we're here to talk about. So let's dive deep and find out the fall of Bleach. How it happened. So first of all, let's define what we mean by the fall. Every week, issues of Shonen Jump come with a card so that readers can rank the series from favourite to least favourite. These results are then polled and ranked, and this is the main way Shonen Jump magazine gauges the popularity of its ongoing series. Titles live and die based on these results. So, in order to gain a clearer picture of what actually took place here, I've gone back through 10 years of ranking data, averaged out a yearly rank for each of the big 3, and then charted those results from 2005 to 2015. I did this mostly because I like numbers, but also because I'm a total fucking loser. Let's check the results. Here we have One Piece, now Naruto, and finally, Bleach. Oh dear. It's not unusual for a series to lose steam over time. You can see it slowly happening with Naruto. But Bleach's fall is a catastrophic failure the likes of which have never occurred in Shonen Jump before. And the question becomes, what happened between 2005 and 2015 that could account for such a massive decline? I think to really understand what happened here, it's important to first understand why Bleach had the initial success it did. Bleach burst onto the scene in 2001, bringing with it a kind of modern energy and stylish aesthetic that quickly set it apart from its competition. While One Piece and Naruto were both set in their own fantasy universes, Bleach took place in our world, and in doing so, became much more relatable. On top of this, Kubo had a knack for churning out some of the most stylish and beautifully attractive character design in Shonen Jump at the time. Characters tended to look a lot older than they did in your average shonen manga, and this lent the series a kind of mature edge. You didn't feel like you were watching a bunch of kids goofing off, but instead a group of teens on the verge of adulthood. The major selling point of early Bleach, however, was the spectacular artwork. You only need to see Kubo draw to appreciate what a brilliantly talented natural draftsperson he is. And in those early days, it shows in every single panel. The story setup was simple. Likeable but grumpy Ichigo Kurosaki is made a substitute Soul Reaper by actual Soul Reaper Rukia, and a fun Monster of the Week style battle manga ensues. Where Bleach really came into its own, however, is with the second major story arc, that of the Soul Society saga. Rukia is kidnapped and erased, or bleached, from Ichigo and his friends' memories, but of course they can't forget their friend, and so the group of supernaturally gifted teenagers must enter the Soul Society and do battle with an ancient and patriarchal order. What really works about this setup is that you have a group of young teenagers facing a society they don't understand with rules that don't seem to make sense. In other words, it's tangential to the feeling of being a teenager on the verge of entering adult society for the first time. It's alien and it's weird and it's scary, and the idea of rebelling against that and re-establishing the set order of things, while not realistic, is a fun fantasy to believe in, especially if you're a confused and scared teenager like I was when I first read it. The introduction of the Soul Society also allowed Kubo to introduce a massive new cast of characters, in the form of the Soul Reapers. And it's here we get to see Kubo really flex his character design muscles. Each new captain and vice captain had a unique design, memorable gimmick, and interesting relationship. And they were also a hugely diverse cast. Women, men, foxes, whatever this thing is, everyone was equal in the Soul Society and anyone could fight. This led to an air of unpredictability to the series and led to some truly stunning encounters. I've talked before about how great I think Ichigo versus Zaraki Kenpachi is, but it doesn't stop there. Chad versus Captain Kyoraku is a terrific example of how to write a squash fight. Oryu versus Mairi is a fantastic and tense underdog battle, and I'll always have a place in my heart for Yorichi versus Siphon for reasons. Fast forward to the end and we get one of the best and most unexpected heel turns in shonen history with the betrayal of Aizen. And we're left with an arc that concludes satisfyingly while also perfectly leaving the door open for the next major encounter. So, with such a strong start, where did things start to go wrong? Well, in short, with the Japanese manga industry. In Yu Yu Hakusho Volume 5, author Yoshiro Tagashi wrote this formula to explain how much free time the average manga author has a week, where X is equal to days until deadlines, which is usually about 5 days considering that most authors write during the weekends. A is hours of sleep per day, 4 to 5 hours max, and P is pages of manga, usually between 19 to 21. And H is time spent per manga page, an average of about 4 hours per page. Take all that and minus the time spent eating, bathing, biological functions and other necessities, and Togashi calculates that in an average week he's left with about 3 to 4 hours of free time, which quite frankly is an insane way to live. The weekly manga industry is a murder machine that eats artists and shits out manga, and it's an environment that only the most freakish of genius can survive. On top of the crushing work schedule, authors must also be able to coexist with their editorial team. And when doing some research into this, I was surprised to see just how much sway editors actually hold. Take for example Kazuhiko Torashima's involvement in what would become the Cell Saga in Akira Toriyama's Dragon Ball Z. The original villains of this arc were just meant to be androids 19 and 20, until Toriyama received a phone call from his former editor, who was Torishima, stating, "So these are the big villains, some fatso and an old geezer." And so Toriyama created 17 and 18, only then to have Torishima call again and express his dissatisfaction, calling the psychotic androids a couple of brats. At which point Toriyama came up with Cell, and after one more displeased phone call, introduced Final Form Cell. Toriyama's gone on record saying how at this point in the story he was just working chapter to chapter with no real plan, and so Torishima's involvement cannot be understated here. And I think it was for the better, as the Cell Saga remains my favourite arc in all of Dragon Ball Z. But unfortunately, not every author-editor relationship is so mutually beneficial, and Kubo in particular has spoken out against the Shonen Jump editorial staff. In an interview with Jump Review, when asked, "What is manga for you?" Kubo replied, "Well, actually, I have no certain definition of it. If you ask me, I would say no need to obey every single thing that the editorial department of Shonen Jump tells. Otherwise, every manga writer's personality and talents won't sparkle." And then when asked, "Do you have a special place in your heart for Shonen Jump?" he simply replied, "To be honest, not that much." Keep in mind that at this point Kubo had been working for Jump over a decade. And there's not just reluctance on Kubo's side. Over the years, you can see Bleach slowly disappearing from the covers of Shonen Jump. In its early days, Bleach used to get multiple covers a year, but as time goes on, we can see Ichigo getting pushed further and further into the background. And there's also been other interviews suggesting that editor-artist relationship troubles started as early as chapter 1. And quickly, we're painted the picture of an artist who doesn't trust his editors, and an editors who slowly lost faith in their artists. This brutal work schedule and tense relationship with Jump would have been exhausting and frustrating to deal with long term, and it's my belief that this caused long-term fatigue and frustration in Kubo, which eventually led to the declining quality of his manga. You can see this happen in several major ways, but the most notable one is the decline of his once stellar artwork. Like, let's look at some panels from early Bleach. See how they brim with life and personality? No two facial expressions are ever quite the same, and the compositions lead your eye around the page in a way that makes reading them an absolute pleasure. Backgrounds are given just enough detail to convey a sense of atmosphere without ever overpowering the characters. Some of the page layouts in particular are quite simply astounding. Like, check out this one where Ichigo slashes the hollow acid wire. How much energy and force can you feel behind this slice? Like, you glance at this page and within a millisecond your brain registers exactly what's happening. No matter how many times I look at it, it always feels like it happened a split second before I read it. That's how good this page is. It slightly warps my perception of time. Now, let's compare these with artwork from much later on in Bleach. The first thing that hits me here is just how hard it is to parse the information of what's actually happening. The clean and beautiful compositions of early years have totally disappeared. Most characters have a blandness to their facial expression that makes it feel they were copied from a model sheet by an assistant rather than anything Kubo would actually draw himself. Backgrounds have nearly completely disappeared, and what we're left with is the feeling of a genius barely trying at all. And it's such a shame because Kubo's aesthetic was arguably his greatest strength, and the major factor in what helped propel his manga to greatness in the first place. The apathy unfortunately would not stop with the artwork, and it could be felt much earlier on in Bleach's second major problem, the long-term overarching story. And while the artwork would only really start to decline in 2013, Kubo's frustration with having to develop a long-form narrative can be felt much earlier on, and in a lot of ways is a much bigger problem. I think one thing to mention at this point is the most important thing in the world to Kubo is drawing cool shit. It's what he initially became famous for, and you can see him mention this over and over in interviews, as well as being pretty much the entire focus of his previous manga, Zombie Powder. He likes drawing awesome things, and story for him is merely a way to link these awesome things, not something to convey a message or make a statement, which was exactly not the case in the Soul Society arc with its subtext of burgeoning adulthood, which is arguably one of the main reasons why the arc is so fondly remembered. However, the cracks begin to show in the third major story arc of Bleach, the Hueco Mundo invasion arc, in which Ichigo and his friends must enter a world they don't understand, face down an ancient and patriarchal society in a desperate battle to rescue their friend. Sound familiar? Yeah. I'm aware the criticism that Kubo repeats his ideas a lot is not a new or especially original one, but I do think in repeating the plot wholesale like this, you lose the subtext that made the storyline so worthwhile the first time around. And it's not like the Hueco Mundo arc doesn't have cool moments, or that it's not enjoyable enough in places, but it represents a startling unwillingness for Kubo to take risks, which is odd because from the first to second major arc in Bleach you went from monster hunting to superpowered samurai battles. It was a shift in tone and it made the series what it was. But now, instead of that same kind of evolution, a lot of the ideas just feel heavily recycled. Character archetypes are repeated, Ichigo must again fight 3 opponents of escalating power, his friends again all split off and fight their own one-on-one fights, and again there's a point where mascot characters transform into ultra-powerful, ultra-sexy women. I could go on, but you get the idea. And the problem compounds when we see similar things happen in the Fullbringer arc and the final Quincy arc. Throughout its close to 700 chapters, Bleach does very little to change up its core template. And one thing I've noticed about the most popular semi-contemporary shonen manga is that they always try new arc structures. Like take for example how Yu Yu Hakusho goes from a martial arts tournament to straight up gang warfare. Or how Naruto went from ninja mission gone wrong to written exam to game of death. Or even One Piece, which went from haunted ship to prison escape to all-out war. Constantly restructuring arcs like this lets us see characters in new ways, and thus get to know new sides of them, while also giving the series an air of unpredictability and danger. Bleach's unwillingness to break routine meant that by the end of the final fight with Aizen, many readers just felt like they had already gotten all they could from Bleach. The long-term story problems don't stop there. The world of Bleach feels kind of, well, hollow, no pun intended. And what's interesting here is that this is also reflected in the artwork. Over time, Kubo just stopped drawing backgrounds unless it was absolutely 100% critical. It doesn't seem like he's giving any express thought to the actual worlds these characters live in. And this really starts to become apparent during the Hueco Mundo arc. The whole thing just feels dead and empty, and yeah, I get that that's kind of the point, but it just doesn't feel like a place that anyone would really live in. It feels much more like an empty level in a video game, and I actually found it really affected my ability to believe the Arrancar as characters, even if I still think Harry Bell is cool as shit. Now compare this dead and empty world to the exciting and ever-changing worlds of Hunter x Hunter, Berserk, or especially One Piece. I think one of the reasons One Piece has remained so evergreen is just how fully established its world is. It's densely layered and is constantly evolving, with ever-changing politics and shifting alliances. And it's one that makes Bleach settings seem positively 2D by comparison. The final and possibly most damning aspect of Bleach's story, however, is in how Kubo writes characters. Whenever a character is introduced, Kubo has a talent for giving the reader a very strong sense of who they are and making them immediately interesting and likable. But again, it's only in the long term that this starts to become a problem. The reason being that as the story goes on, we get very little in the way of reinforcing that character or developing them further. Mostly what we get instead are just kind of sad anime flashbacks. I might talk more about this in the future, but sad flashbacks are not a replacement to actually developing and sustaining a character. By the end of Bleach, a lot of characters were very similar to how they were when they were first introduced, and some have even gotten far less interesting. No better example of this than main character Ichigo Kurosaki. Ichigo starts out as a Yusuke Urameshi style badass who kicks people in the face and makes friends with ghosts. But by the end of the Hueco Mundo arc, he's a shell of what he was. A boring, somber figure whose only real motivation is that he wants to fight to protect his friends. This in itself is a serious problem because it creates a cycle with Ichigo where he is constantly reacting to things happening to him, while never actually being proactive in his own life. Now compare that with Naruto or Luffy. Whatever you think of them personally, they both have their own goals and ambitions. Naruto wants to become Hokage, Luffy wants to find One Piece. They are self-motivated and thus their journey is self-perpetuating. Thus, they are better suited to a long-form story. But Ichigo, well, what does he want? Once the supernatural entities stop interfering with his life, what will he do? I never got the feeling he enjoys the supernatural battles, nor does he disdain them, so what is it? What are his goals? What are his dreams? Who is he? The fact that I've read hundreds of chapters of Bleach and cannot answer these questions poses a major issue with the series as a whole. Now, I can already hear angry fingers slamming against keyboards, but the reason I bring these points up is not to shit on Bleach or its fans. Quite frankly, I think you guys have been through enough already. As I've already mentioned, the goal here is to account for its loss in popularity, not my personal opinion on Bleach. So with that in mind, let's see if we can return to our timeline and tie this all together. During the later 2000s, Bleach is riding high off the success of the Soul Society arc and the introduction of popular new characters like Grimmjow and Ulquiorra, who admittedly are pretty fucking awesome. But we start to see the repetition of the story kick in and its first dip in 2009. 2010 sees us back up to number 3 as the Aizen arc draws to a close. But the problem then becomes that once we remove Bleach's major villain, whose arc began when the series was at its most popular, the lack of real character development, setting and templated nature of the arcs meant that there just wasn't really a whole lot to keep the casual manga reader interested anymore. And so we see Bleach dive 4 whole places. Further decline from the unpopular Fullbringer arc as well as the cancellation of the anime in 2012 brings us right up to 2013, and at this point I would guess that Kubo, sick of publishers and fan backlash, simply stops giving the series his all, and we start to see the real decline in the artwork, which would have alienated all but the most hardcore Bleach fans. This takes us right to 2015, where Bleach sits near the very bottom of the Shonen Jump rankings, leading to that sudden and devastating cancellation and the brutally short final 3-chapter run. It's hard to say if the fault lies with Kubo himself or with the Shonen Jump editorial staff, but either way I think it's really sad what happened here, and I say that as someone who's openly criticised Bleach in the past. Whatever your opinion of Tite Kubo and his work, I do feel that the series deserved a better end than this, and while I myself am a long since lapsed fan of Bleach, I still think back to those early chapters fondly. And whether you're still a diehard, a lapsed fan like myself, or never had any interest in Bleach, I strongly encourage you to go back and check out some of the early material. It's hard not to read these pages and not remember what a massive amount of potential Kubo actually had. And in a way it makes me think that maybe the end of Bleach is the best possible thing that would happen to Kubo. Whatever he tries his hand at next, I'll be there to check it out, because at the end of the day he was and still is the author of what was at one time the third most prolific manga in the world. Guys, that's a video. I want to give a shout out to my friend Rebecca, who did the opening artwork and whose blog you should totally check out, link in the description, as well as my friend Sam, who helped me catch up with some of the more recent goings on in Bleach. I'm going to be back next time with one of my regular Why You Should Watches, but in the meantime I'm always looking for suggestions on videos, so why not tweet me at iPatchWolf, or come listen to me complain about Dark Souls 3 over on the Let's Fight a Boss video game podcast. Guys, as always, I just want to say how much I really appreciate the support that's been shown to this channel. Thanks again, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.